I'd like to welcome everybody to Add Thoughts Entertainment page today. My name is James. I'm in long-term recovery. I'm going to give you some experience, strength, and hope today. I grew up in an alcoholic home. My father was an alcoholic. He was violent. He was physically, emotionally abusive to my mother, me, my brother, my sister. And so, growing up, I vowed that I never wanted to be like that man. I wanted to do better. I wanted to be better. And so, throughout my childhood and high school, I did fairly well. I got good grades. And I was a smart individual. I just sometimes went the wrong ways or hung out with the wrong people or did some wrong things. But I managed to graduate and I got accepted to the Ohio State University College. And I remember driving up to Columbus with my family. We all went up for an orientation. And I went into the auditorium and it was packed with thousands of kids that were enrolling that year. And I was scared. I'd never been away from home and I was overwhelmed. And I remember on the ride home telling my parents that I couldn't do it. I couldn't handle it. I was too scared. Fear had took over me and I just didn't want to do it. So I sat around at home for a little while, working, trying to figure out the next step, and a commercial came on for DeVry University. And I called them and met with the reps and did the paperwork, and they accepted me, and I was going to start at DeVry. It was a smaller school. It seemed more manageable to me. Even though it was out of town and I was still going to have to leave home, I still felt like it was smaller and more manageable for me to handle. And plus, everybody at that time was telling me, go for computers, go for computers. Now, up until this point, I've never touched a computer. No, there was no computers in my high school. We didn't have a computer. I didn't know the first thing about them. But that's what everybody said the future was. Turns out they was right, but the doubts were in my mind because I didn't know anything about it. I've always wanted to be a person that's on the radio, a DJ, talk show type radio guy. And so that was my dream, but I followed what everybody else wanted me to do. It came the day where I was getting ready to leave, and my family was excited, but at the same time, they were sad that I was leaving. And I remember the recruiter pulling up, and my mom was crying, and I'm hugging her, and my brother and my sister, and I'm getting ready to leave and go out of town to school. And I know they was proud of me, but at the same time, it was a sad, kind of occasion for everybody because, I was leaving. And my father had a room down in the basement. And he calls me down there. And he says, son, you're going to a new city where you don't know nobody. And he hands me 2 pistols. And he says, carry these wherever you go for your protection. And he looks at me and he says the last thing to me before I leave out, he says, oh, and if you pull it out, you better use it. He hugs me. I tuck one gun in my waistband. I put the other in my bag. And I jump in the car with the DeVry recruiter, him not knowing the whole time that I have 2 guns on me. And we drive to Columbus. He drops me off downtown in a 1-bedroom apartment that they have set up for me. They got me set up at a little job in the cafeteria. And for like the first year or so, things go pretty well. I'm struggling academically. Like I said, I don't know too much about computers, but I'm learning. I'm a smart individual, so I'm kind of picking it up, and I'm making it. Not doing overly great, but not failing at all. I'm just kind of, making the grades. Really not interested though. And if I'm not interested, it really doesn't make for success. So the first year was okay. And about the second year, I meet an individual that I knew from Cincinnati, associate. We hung out together a couple times. Wouldn't say a friend, but he was a cool dude, and we got to talking, and he told me that he had a house up on campus, and it was a 4-bedroom house, and they had a room available and that I could rent it. And I was living in that 1-bedroom apartment by myself. The guy that I came up to school with had left. He ran into some financial difficulties, so I was living by myself, and I thought, yeah, I'll take the room. I'll be able to hang out with some people, get to know some people and do some things, and it'll be good for me. When I got there, it was a frat house. They drank and drug, partied all the time. And up until this point, I never drank or drug. I still hadn't taken my first drink or anything. And needless to say, I started. And I'll cover my first drink in another video. I believe that needs its own isolated video because it was a turning point in my life. So anyway, I started drinking and drugging, and we would go out to parties on the weekends and have fun and do things, and just like my father told me all the time, I carried the gun on me wherever I went, one of the pistols. And so needless to say, there were several incidences with me going out, me being drunk, and me carrying the pistols. I'll touch on one today, and that's the story I'm getting at. We go out to this house party. Back then it was house party. And we pull up, and there's people all in the yard, and the music's blaring, and there's a DJ in there, and people are drinking, smoking weed, and we was drinking on the way there and smoking, and we pull up and we get out, and one of my friends says, I got to use the bathroom, so he runs down the street to use the bathroom, and we're still hanging out, talking and partying, and it's taking a little while, so I'm like, man, he's been down there a little while. Let me go check on him. So I run down the street to check on him, and as I get down there, I see that a guy has a gun to his head. And so I walk up on the guy, I take the gun out from back of my waist, and I put it to his head. And I say, drop the gun. He drops the gun. And I'm drunk and I'm high, so I'm not in the right state of mind. But I do have a little sense of reality in my mind is saying, don't do it. But all the while, in my mind, I hear my father's voice. If you pull it out, you better use it. Don't do it. If you pull it out, you better use it. Don't do it. If you pull it out, you better use it. Click, click. I pull the trigger. A couple days later, I take the gun to the gun shop. And I put it on the counter. And I tell the man, this is broken. Can you check it out? He says, yeah, give me a couple hours, come back, and I'll see what I can do for you. I go back to the shop a couple hours later, and the man comes out, he brings the gun out, and he says, are you the man that fired this gun? I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, well, there's 2 bullets lodged in this chamber. He said, technically, that gun should have blew up and you shouldn't have a right arm. Now, I'm telling you this story because, one, I shot that gun. I shouldn't have a right arm. 2, if it would have shot, I would have killed that man and more than likely been sentenced to life in prison. Or 3, I can be sitting here telling you this story because that wasn't God's plan for me. He had other ideas. Thanks for listening. James, Recovery Junkie, Addict Thoughts Entertainment.